Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Sarah Thompson sat on the worn old sofa in her Chicago apartment, her shoulders hunched with fatigue and worry. Around her, the evening silence was broken only by the steady breathing of her sleeping children in the next room. Emma, the oldest, was probably dreaming of lighter things than unpaid bills and breadcrumbs on the table. Lucas and Mia, the youngest, were still unaware of the tensions of adult life, but Sarah could sense their silent anxiety in their restless sleep. Since her husband, Richard, abandoned them, every day was a struggle to survive. Bills piled up, groceries were measured to the nearest cent, and job offers were few and far between. Sarah had tried everything imaginable: waitress, babysitter, administrative assistant. But no job was enough to support her 3 children. That evening, as she stared at the cracked ceiling of her apartment, an incongruous message appeared on her phone. Unique offer: temporary work for a billionaire. Generous pay. Complete discretion. 1 hour only. Sarah's heart leaped. Her eyes scanned the message several times, incredulous. She bit her lip, hesitant. An hour, for this? But, why me? She whispered. Fear and shame mingled with necessity. She thought of her children, their empty bellies and their missing toys. She thought of the nights she cried herself to sleep, unable to find a solution. After hours of consideration, Sarah made a decision. She was going to accept. Not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. She stood up, clutched her phone to her chest, and took a deep breath. For my children. I can do it. 1 hour. Just 1 hour. Little did she know, this simple decision would change her life forever. An hour that promised temporary wealth would open a door to a world of luxury, power, and unexpected revelations, a world she never would have dared to imagine. The next morning, Sarah Thompson rose before dawn. The city was still asleep, but she was already ready. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple but elegant dress, and spent long minutes smoothing her hair to give an impression of confidence despite the trembling in her hands. Her children, unaware of what awaited her, were still sleeping peacefully. The drive to the Sterling mansion seemed endless. The assigned private vehicle rumbled through the silent streets of Chicago, and the closer she got, the faster Sarah's heart pounded. She'd read a few articles about Alexander Sterling, a billionaire, a quiet philanthropist known for his high standards and taste for extravagant events. But none of her reading had prepared her for what she was about to see. The mansion stood majestically on the shores of Lake Michigan, surrounded by manicured gardens and white marble columns. The wrought iron gates swung open with a perfect glide as the car approached. Sarah felt a pang of intimidation. I can do this. I have to do this, she whispered to herself. At the entrance, Emily Carter, Alexander's personal assistant, greeted him. Tall and dressed in a crisp black suit, Emily looked stern but professional. Welcome, Mrs. Thompson. Alexander is expecting you. Remember, your role is simple: be yourself, but polite and attentive. 1 o'clock. Exactly 1 o'clock. Sarah nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. She followed Emily through the vast lobby, decorated with crystal chandeliers, antique paintings, and luxurious Persian rugs. Each step echoed almost solemnly off the marble. Then she saw him. Alexander Sterling was standing by the fireplace, a man in his prime, with slightly graying hair and a penetrating gaze. His eyes seemed to read beyond appearances, and his erect posture exuded authority and confidence. He nodded to her, a polite but distant smile on his lips. Mrs. Thompson, I'm glad you came, he said in a calm, deep voice. Emily explained your situation to me. I appreciate your courage. Sarah felt her cheeks flush. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I'll do my best. Alexander invited her to sit in the living room with its velvet armchairs. The first hour was silent, punctuated by sensitive questions about her experiences, her values, and her way of handling difficult situations. Each of Sarah's answers was measured, sincere, yet tinged with nervousness. As time passed, Alexander seemed increasingly intrigued. He wasn't just interested in what she could do for him, but in who she really was. Sarah, despite her initial apprehension, began to relax slightly, sensing that genuine human interaction was taking place, a rarity in Sterling's cold, calculating world. When the hour was up, Alexander stood up and handed her an envelope. "For your time and honesty. Consider it a gesture of respect, not a purchase." Sarah took it, her hands slightly trembling, and felt a strange mixture of relief, gratitude, and confusion. This first meeting, planned for a mere hour, had just laid the foundation for an unexpected relationship, a relationship that would transform her life and the lives of her children. Sarah Thompson took a deep breath as she opened the envelope Alexander had handed her. Inside, a sum of money she'd never seen before made her head spin. Her hands trembled slightly as she carefully folded it. But instead of excitement, a strange mixture of embarrassment and guilt washed over her. Accepting that amount for a mere hour seemed surreal, and almost humiliating. Alexander, noticing her hesitation, sat down opposite her, resting his elbows on his knees. "Mrs. Thompson, what you just did was nothing like ordinary service. You were sincere, attentive, and present. I pay for your time, yes, but more importantly, for your honesty and courage." Sarah blinked, surprised by the softness and clarity of his words. She had always thought that rich people looked down on the world, but this man treated her with respect. I don't know what to say," she whispered. I've never been in a situation like this." Alexander gave a small smile. "Then just be yourself. There's nothing else to do." Over the next hour, something unexpected happened. Sarah talked about her life, her children, her failures, and her small daily victories. She spoke authentically, without trying to impress or hide her weaknesses. Alexander listened attentively, sometimes asking a subtle question to probe a little deeper, but always with kindness. He was surprised by Sarah's clarity and maturity. Every word revealed an inner strength, an ability to face despair without breaking. Little by little, the atmosphere relaxed, and Sarah felt the tension that had gripped her since her arrival dissipate. She was no longer a woman on the verge of despair, she was a person worthy of respect, and Alexander saw it clearly. When the hour drew to a close, Alexander stood up and handed her the envelope again. "This time," he insisted, "you must accept. This is not payment for any service. It is an acknowledgement of who you are." Sarah took the envelope, clutching it like a talisman. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you so much, Mr. Sterling." Alexander nodded. "You're welcome, Mrs. Thompson. But know this hour is just the beginning." Sarah frowned, curious but cautious. Alexander, noticing her reaction, added simply, "Sometimes, just 1 hour is enough to change a life." As Sarah left the manor, her heart pounded with a mixture of worry and excitement. She had just had a unique experience, but something told her that this encounter would not remain a mere memory. This decisive hour had just opened a door to a world she had never imagined entering, a world where courage and authenticity could, perhaps, change her destiny. Back in her modest apartment, Sarah Thompson placed the envelope on the kitchen table. Her children played around her, laughing and chatting as if poverty and everyday worries didn't exist. But Sarah still felt the weight of the hour she had just spent. She had accepted money for a role she never imagined she would play, and yet something inside her told her that this experience was not simply a transaction. The next morning, as she opened her mailbox, an anonymous package caught her eye. Inside were several documents and files bound with silky ribbon. Sarah frowned, intrigued and worried. She opened the papers cautiously and discovered detailed information about Alexander Sterling, his real estate empire, his discreet philanthropic projects, and his reputation as a demanding but fair man. As she read on, Sarah realized something surprising: Alexander didn't choose his collaborators at random. He looked for people who could see beyond appearances, who could judge with intelligence, humanity, and honesty. The file suggested that Sarah hadn't been contacted by chance or out of a need for entertainment. He had observed her, analyzed her, and chosen her for her human qualities and resilience. This revelation shocked Sarah. Everything she had felt during the hour she spent with Alexander, respect, curiosity, kindness, was no illusion. She had been chosen not for her appearance or for a superficial role, but for what she truly represented, a woman of courage, honesty, and determination despite hardship. As Sarah reread these documents, she felt a new energy growing within her. An idea formed: perhaps this opportunity could be more than just a temporary salary. Perhaps it was the beginning of real change for her and her children. But with this possibility also came fear. She knew the fragility of her situation. Agreeing to delve deeper into Alexander Sterling's life meant exposing herself to an unknown world, filled with challenges and scrutiny. She had to think, weigh her options, and decide if she had the courage to walk through this door opened by chance, or by destiny. As she looked at her children, Sarah realized that the decision wasn't just hers to make. This time, she could only think about their safety, their future, and the possibility of transforming their lives. With a mixture of fear and excitement, she made the decision that would change her destiny: she would answer Alexander. A new opportunity, unexpected and secret, had just revealed itself. And Sarah, despite the anxiety and uncertainty, felt she was ready to face it. 2 days after receiving the documents, Sarah received an unusual call on her cell phone. Alexander Sterling's voice, calm and measured, echoed on the other end of the line. "Ms. Thompson, I hope you've taken some time to think about this. I have a proposition for you." Sarah's heart was pounding. She tried to keep her voice calm. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. I'm listening." He then explained to her that he needed a personal advisor to manage some delicate philanthropic and professional projects. Not as an ordinary employee, not as a secretary or assistant, but as someone capable of taking initiative, solving problems with intelligence and diplomacy, and above all, representing integrity and discretion. "I believe you have the necessary qualities for this role, Ms. Thompson," he said. "You are honest, insightful, and you know how to remain calm under pressure. I am offering you this opportunity." Sarah was silent for a moment, surprised and confused. She'd never considered working for a billionaire, let alone in a role that seemed so important. But as she looked around her modest apartment, the toys scattered around, and the children she wanted to protect, she realized this might be the opportunity she'd been waiting for all her life. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "It's a lot to take in." Alexander smiled softly. "I'm not asking you to answer now. Take your time to think. But know this role isn't about money. It's about potential and confidence." Sarah hung up the phone and sat down, her heart pounding. For the first time in a long time, she envisioned a future where she and her children could live with stability and dignity. This role represented more than a job; it was a chance to transform their lives, to escape poverty, and to prove to herself that she could be part of a world that had previously seemed inaccessible. After a long night of reflection, she made her decision. She called Alexander the next morning. "Mr. Sterling, I want to accept your offer. I will do everything in my power to live up to it." A silence followed by an audible smile in Alexander's voice. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Thompson. You won't regret it." That day, Sarah felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. She knew this role would push her out of her comfort zone, confront her with unexpected challenges, and expose her to a world of wealth and power she had never known. But she also knew it represented the opportunity she had been waiting for her whole life. For Sarah Thompson, the hour of despair was over. A new life was beginning, full of challenges, mysteries, and hope. Sarah Thompson's first official day at the Sterling mansion was a mixture of fascination and intimidation. Every detail seemed designed to impress and captivate: the polished marble floors, the crystal chandeliers reflecting the morning light, the vast Persian rugs, and the artwork hanging on the walls. Everything about the place exuded luxury and power, a world away from her modest Chicago apartment. Emily Carter, Alexander's personal assistant, showed her around the mansion, introducing the staff and explaining the strict protocols. Sarah quickly realized that every action, every word, was being watched and evaluated. A simple mistake might seem insignificant in ordinary life, but here, it would have consequences. The first challenge arose almost immediately. An influential guest, an investor named Charles Whitmore, arrived unexpectedly to discuss a real estate project. Emily warned her in a low voice, "Be careful, he's demanding and impatient. Don't let your nervousness show." Sarah took a deep breath and entered the living room. Whitmore scrutinized her, clearly skeptical of her presence. But thanks to her calm, courteous manner, and spontaneous intelligence, Sarah managed to manage the situation. She welcomed the guest, offered refreshments, and confidently answered his questions. At the end of the interview, Whitmore nodded with a mixture of surprise and respect. But that was only the beginning. The Manor's employees, some jealous of the new recruit, began to whisper behind her back. Sarah felt the inquisitive stares, heard thinly veiled comments about her social status and youth. She quickly realized that she not only had to prove herself to Alexander, but also navigate a complex web of alliances and internal rivalries. Despite everything, Sarah found a source of strength in her family. Every night she came home to find her children laughing around the table, their faces lit up with hope and newfound stability. This new life, though difficult and demanding, brought Sarah a satisfaction she had never known before. She felt she finally had a role where her courage, resilience, and intelligence were valued. At the end of the first week, Alexander called her into his office. He looked at Sarah with a mixture of appreciation and admiration. "You're adjusting well, Miss Thompson. First challenges are never easy. But you're showing that you can handle the pressure and earn respect. Keep it up." Sarah, despite the fatigue and stress, felt a surge of pride wash over her. She knew the road ahead would still be long and fraught with challenges, but she was now certain that this role could transform her life, and that of her children, far beyond what she had dared to imagine. A few weeks into her new role, Sarah Thompson was beginning to find her groove at Sterling Manor. She handled the unexpected with confidence, influential guests respected her, and Alexander trusted her to make important decisions. Yet, despite this success, a shadow from the past was about to disrupt her life. One morning, as she was walking home from school with Lucas and Mia, she saw a familiar figure on the sidewalk in front of the building, Richard, her ex-husband. His hard face and calculating gaze paralyzed her for a moment. He hadn't changed, and yet he seemed more menacing than ever. "Sarah," he said coldly. "We need to talk. I want to see the children again." Sarah felt her heart sink. She knew Richard hadn't come out of curiosity. He wanted to disrupt her life, to regain the control he'd lost years ago. She placed a protective hand on Lucas's shoulder and an arm around Mia. "Richard, you know perfectly well that I'm in charge of custody." "You can't." Richard interrupted, his tone becoming more insistent. "Don't play innocent, Sarah. Do you think your new life can erase everything that happened? I'm going to take back what's mine." The confrontation brought back painful memories, the nights she cried alone, the struggles to feed her children, the silent humiliations she endured to keep her family afloat. But Sarah also felt a new strength growing within her. She was no longer the desperate woman she had once been. She had gained courage, confidence, and resources. She took a deep breath and replied firmly, "Richard, you have no right to disrupt my family. I protect my children, and I will continue to do so. If you want to discuss anything, it will be with my lawyer." Richard, visibly irritated by her audacity, looked at her for a moment, then walked away without a word, silently vowing to return. That evening, Sarah confided the situation to Alexander. She explained the threat Richard posed and her concern for the safety and peace of her children. Alexander listened attentively, his expression impassive but his gaze penetrating. "You reacted well, Sarah," he said finally. "This kind of situation requires calm, strategy, and firmness. I will make sure you and your family are protected. You are not alone in this battle." Sarah felt a mixture of gratitude and relief. Alexander wasn't just helping her in her professional role, he was also ensuring the safety and well-being of her family. This ordeal strengthened their bond. She understood that trust and mutual respect were not just words in the Sterling mansion, but concrete values she could count on. And she knew, deep down, that despite the threats of the past, her new life, although demanding and full of challenges, offered her a strength and security she had never known. A few months had passed since Sarah Thompson began working for Alexander Sterling. What had begun as a simple job to support her children had become a veritable immersion into a world of luxury, power, and responsibility. Sarah had earned Alexander's trust with her intelligence, calm, and integrity. But their relationship was now beginning to move on to more personal ground. One evening, after a long day of meetings and site visits, Alexander invited Sarah to dinner in his office, a private and understated space in the heart of the manor. The dim lighting created an intimate atmosphere, away from the prying eyes of staff or guests. "Sarah," Alexander said, sitting down opposite her, "I'd like to speak with you, not as an employee, but as a person." Sarah felt her heart beat a little faster. She nodded, curious and slightly nervous. "I'm listening." He then spoke about his life, his responsibilities, and the challenges he faced as a public figure, constantly scrutinized by the media and his peers. He shared anecdotes about his philanthropic projects, the moral dilemmas he faced, and the loneliness he felt despite his wealth and power. Sarah, for her part, opened up about her children, the sacrifices she had made for them, and the daily struggles to keep her family together and safe. She spoke with sincerity, sometimes with a trembling voice, sometimes with a determined look. This seemingly simple conversation created a deep bond between them. Alexander began to see Sarah not only as an indispensable collaborator, but as a woman with rare values, inner strength, and authenticity. Sarah, for her part, discovered the sensitivity and humanity behind Alexander's public image as a billionaire. Over the next few weeks, their bond grew. Alexander called on Sarah for important decisions, shared confidences, and sought her advice on personal and professional matters. Sarah, who had always been wary of the wealthy world, learned to trust him. She felt a deep mutual respect, a mixture of admiration and affection that transcended professional boundaries. But this budding bond wasn't without its challenges. Some of the manor's employees and guests murmured about this unexpected alliance, some doubting Sarah's sincerity, others jealous of Alexander's attention to her. Yet each obstacle strengthened the bond between them. They learned to support each other, protect each other, and build a relationship based on trust and respect. For Sarah, this newfound intimacy represented uncharted but reassuring territory. She had never imagined that a professional relationship could evolve into something so human and sincere. And Alexander, for the first time in a long time, felt that he could share his life with someone who truly understood him, without judgment or superficial interest. This trust and intimacy, patiently built over days and trials, would soon be tested by unexpected events that would force Sarah to defend her family, her reputation, and the fragile but powerful bond that united them. A few weeks after strengthening their bond, Sarah Thompson and Alexander Sterling were faced with an unexpected situation that would test their alliance and their mutual trust. One morning, Alexander received a discreet call from his office. An influential competitor, Marcus Langley, had begun spreading rumors about Sarah. The information was false, portraying her as manipulative, interested only in money and access to Sterling's power. Some employees began to whisper, and suspicious glances followed Sarah into the mansion. Sarah immediately sensed the tension. She knew her reputation was fragile in this environment, and that the slightest mistake could discredit her in the eyes of Alexander and his associates. But instead of giving in to fear, she turned to Alexander, who was waiting for her in his office, his face impassive. "Sarah," he said calmly, "I know these rumors are false. But we must counter them with strategy, not anger." Together, they devised a plan. Alexander would use his network to verify the information and publicly expose Langley's manipulation, while Sarah would prepare documents and testimonies to demonstrate her integrity and professionalism. Every move was to be calculated to preserve her reputation and demonstrate her strength in the face of adversity. On the day of the confrontation, Alexander invited the senior partners and a few key partners to a private meeting. Sarah, nervous but determined, spoke confidently, calmly explaining her side of the story, demonstrating her essential role in Sterling's plans and her sincere commitment to the company. Alexander, for his part, publicly confirmed his confidence in Sarah. "She is not only a valuable collaborator," he said, "but someone whose integrity and judgment are beyond reproach. Any attempt to discredit her is doomed to failure." The strategy paid off. The whispers ceased, the jealous employees fell silent, and Langley, unmasked, had to face reality. Sarah Thompson was not a threat, but a valuable asset in Alexander's circle. This episode sealed their alliance. Sarah understood that Alexander saw her not just as an employee, but as a partner capable of navigating the murky waters of power and influence. Alexander, for his part, realized that Sarah's strength and courage went beyond what he had imagined when they first met. For Sarah, this victory wasn't just professional. It symbolized recognition of her worth, confirmation that she could stand proudly in a world that once seemed inaccessible. And this strategic alliance, born of mutual trust and loyalty, would soon be tested by even more personal and intense challenges. The following months were marked by a dramatic transformation in Sarah Thompson's life. She had not only earned Alexander Sterling's trust and respect, but had also established herself as an indispensable collaborator, capable of handling complex situations with composure and intelligence. Her children, witnessing her success and newfound confidence, found a stability they had never known. Emma, Lucas, and Mia could now enjoy a more comfortable life, with better schools, extracurricular activities, and above all, the sense of security that only their mother could provide. Sarah felt a deep pride, but also a silent gratitude toward the man who had believed in her when she still had only despair and courage. One evening, Alexander invited her to a formal dinner attended by several key investors and partners. It wasn't just a social event, it was an opportunity for Sarah to showcase her skills and her vital role in the company. As she entered the room, dressed in an elegant but understated dress, she felt all eyes turned toward her. The murmurs died down as Alexander introduced her to all the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "let me introduce Sarah Thompson. Not only has she joined our team, but she has become a vital pillar of our projects and vision. Her integrity, intelligence, and courage are invaluable." Applause rang out in the room. Sarah felt a mixture of emotion and pride. She was no longer the hesitant and desperate woman who had walked through the doors of the manor a few months earlier. She was being recognized for what she truly was, a worthy, competent person capable of great things. This moment of recognition was reinforced by an unexpected surprise. Alexander, with a discreet smile, handed Sarah an envelope containing a partnership agreement and shares in some of his companies. "This," he said, "is to recognize your value and your role in our shared success." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. It was more than a financial gesture, it was validation, proof that her courage and perseverance had paid off. For the first time in years, she felt truly free, respected, and capable of building a secure future for her family. As she walked home that evening, the children running to meet her with beaming smiles, Sarah realized that every sacrifice, every moment of doubt, and every difficult decision had finally led to this moment. Success and recognition were no longer distant dreams, but a tangible reality she shared with her family and Alexander Sterling. And deep down, Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The life she'd always imagined, full of dignity, security, and opportunity, was finally within reach. As the years passed, Sarah Thompson's life had changed dramatically. What had begun as a simple hour in the Sterling manor, a desperate gesture to provide for her children, had transformed into an existence of dignity, respect, and achievement. Sarah was no longer just a collaborator of Alexander Sterling, she had become a partner, an influential figure in his philanthropic and professional endeavors. But beyond material success and social recognition, she had built something even more precious, a legacy of courage, resilience, and love for her family. Her children, now older and more confident, witnessed their mother's strength. Emma, strong and independent, pursued her studies with passion. Lucas displayed impressive curiosity and intelligence. Mia, gentle and determined, had inherited Sarah's deep sense of justice and dignity. Every decision, every sacrifice Sarah made had been a building block for their future, and they now understood its value. One bright morning, Sarah rose before her children and gazed at the mansion from the terrace, Lake Michigan sparkling in the sunlight. Alexander joined her, silent, and took her hand. "You've changed so many people's lives, Sarah," he said sincerely. "Not just mine, but the lives of your children and everyone you touch." Sarah smiled softly. "I never thought a single hour could have such an impact," she whispered. "But that hour taught me that courage and integrity can change lives, if you dare to follow them." Alexander nodded. "And you did it with a grace and strength few possess. Your legacy is not measured solely in wealth or success, but in what you leave behind, values, hope, and an example for your children." For Sarah, it was a moment of profound peace. All the trials, all the fears, and all the nights of worry had led to this present. She understood that true luxury lay not only in marble walls or elegant clothes, but in the ability to stand with dignity, protect her family, and inspire those around her. Later, at a family dinner, Sarah watched her children laugh and play, surrounded by safety and love. She remembered the times when hunger, cold, and despair seemed insurmountable. And she knew that every sacrifice had been necessary, every difficult choice had led her here. Sarah Thompson's story had become much more than a tale of survival, it had become a living legacy, a testament to courage and perseverance. One hour, one decision, one act of bravery had been enough to transform an entire life. And through her success, her children, and her influence, that legacy would continue to grow, illuminating the world around her with the same strength and dignity that had guided Sarah from the beginning. She smiled serenely, knowing that the past, with its fears and trials, no longer defined her future. She had transformed it into a bright, powerful, and dignified future, the legacy she would leave forever.